Welcome to this press conference focusing on interfaith collaboration at COP29 and an interfaith statement that has been released. I am pleased to be here with the esteemed panelists, Valerian Bernard of Brahma Kumaris, Dr. Iyad Abu-Mogli, the founder and director of the UN Environment Programme's Faith for Earth initiative, and Reverend Henry Grappe of the World Council of Churches. And we're here because religion has an important role to play on the world stage for a sustainable future. And part of that role is coming out with public statements on the need to take action for a livable planet. And the Interfaith Liaison Committee has issued an interfaith call to action at COP29, calling on world leaders to take ambitious climate action. And the four of us actually come from 4 different faith traditions, and we live in 4 different countries. And Valerian and Reverend Henrik are the co-chairs of the Interfaith Liaison Committee to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we're going to share with you over the next 26 minutes about faith in ecology, faith in climate change, and this interfaith call to action. So Valerian, I'd like to just invite you, maybe you could give us a little bit of a sense of what are some of the essential messages of it, and why is this an important statement?
Thank you very much for inviting us to this press conference. First, what I would like to say to all of you is that we actually did this call with a number of organizations and people. So we spread the voice that this call was going to happen, and there was about 40 to 50 different people who were interested to participate from different walks of life and different faiths. And this is how we had 2 webinars. And during these 2 webinars, we collected about 7 or 8 pages of statements that these individual people and organizations believed were very important to incorporate to a call for action or a statement to the UNFCCC before the COP29 or at the COP29. So I'm very proud of that because it's transparent and it is also leaving space for everyone to participate. Basically, we have different chapters. One is on ambitious climate action, one is on climate finance, on loss and damage, on climate and intergenerational justice, indigenous people's rights, and gender equality, on war, conflict, and climate action for peace, on call to faith-based organizations, our own people, our own home, to actually make a difference within their organizations.
Thank you. And Dr. Iyad, if you could just share a little bit from your perspective about why you think this is important.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Indeed, it is very important to highlight why the partner organizations from faith perspectives are coming together. Of course, everybody believes in science, and scientific evidence has been demonstrated time and again in reports by the UN, by other international bodies. We also believe in environmental governance and intergovernmental negotiations and the policies. They are all important for moving forward in tackling the climate crisis. But we feel, the faith organizations do feel that there is a missing component, which is the moral responsibility, the ethical approach of policies, technology, and science. And we believe that what changes the behavior of the people is their beliefs, is the driving force between the connections between their minds and their hearts. And this is what different religions we have been working, and the ILC has been working with more than 15 global religions, but of course many, many other congregations. And you wouldn't find any one of them not agreeing on the responsibility to care for the earth and its resources, and to work on protecting what is, or preventing what is causing the climate issues. And many of the organizations believe that it is at the heart of it, it is the unsustainable consumption and unsustainable production, and the way the old paradigm that we are using for development and economic prosperity, which needs to be addressed, as I said, from an ethical perspective. This is why the faith organizations are coming together to propose not an alternative, but an additional complementing mechanism to support negotiators and support, nations when they develop their ambitious, determined contributions, to think about how can we address all these pressing, catastrophic, in fact, impacts of climate change faster and with longer and more sustainable ways to do so. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Iyad, Reverend Henrik.
Thank you. I think my colleagues here all covered many of the important things. I just want to add some. I think what can be a missing piece when it comes to get a good climate deal or good climate deals now and in the future is also the values that we are driven for to make those decisions. And I think that is not really so much up to the agenda. We are so presupposed that we are on the same page in this. And I think we might not always be, but I think that the faith communities have an important contribution to this. If we say like 83% or something say that they belong to some kind of faith on this earth, that means that their values, their moral obligations to act often comes, even if it's not very clear, often comes from the religious culture that they come from. And we have to go back in our different worlds, in our different religions, and we will find that all our world religions, and I would say most of the religions, part of being religious is also a caretaker, to take care of the most vulnerable. We abstain in our different religions. We have fast, we have different names for what we are doing to actually act for the most vulnerable. And we also see that, especially from the indigenous cultures, we also see the importance to include what we call nature or Mother Earth or creation or what we ever call it, to include that in our caring, especially now when we know that we're living on a small planet, so to say, when it comes to the greed of humanity to actually take as much as we can. We need to include and not be so very focused on humanity, because humanity cannot live without a functioning ecosystem. So I think also that many of the faith communities are also representing a grassroots level. Our only interest is the well-being of the earth and the people of the earth. That is something that I think, and it's also global in many ways. Christianity has a global networks, and also from other faiths, we actually act from a kind of same perspective. And I think it's also from the religions and from the faith communities we can also question the hegemony of economics. We are talking much about finance, but also we can now see that we are talking about non-economic loss and damage. And what is that? What is that? How do we acknowledge the non-economic loss and damage? I just give you a short story from a man in my age in Fiji who lives by the coast side. He lived there for some generations. But due to climate change already and taking away the mangroves, we went to his place, and then he pointed out 100 meters out to the sea. He said, that was the way I was walking to school, on the other side of the graveyard. And you see some stones out there. That was where they buried the ancestors. So the sea has already taken, and how do you cannot repair only by money by this. There was soil intrusion into so they couldn't have any vegetables anymore. And at the same time, just beside his place, they were taking more of the mangroves to build a resort for tourists. That is unsustainable, and that is also a way of a non-economic loss and damage. The culture, the meaning of being rooted in the land, that is very important for many people, it's gone away. How do you acknowledge this when we talk about non-economic loss and damage? And that brings up also more of the values that is not possible to put into economics. So I think that this kind of discussion also must be a part when we talk about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to, first of all, mention that 61 organizations endorsed this statement, mostly faith-based organizations from many religious and faith traditions and many continents. There are also two other statements that have been released at this COP, or one was prior to it at the Faith Leaders Summit that was hosted earlier in November here in Baku, and a second appeal for protecting our climate system, Earth Governance for a Sustainable Future, which was released by the Climate Governance Commission, the World Federalist Movement, and which had over 200 organizations and individuals signing on it. In terms of this Interfaith Liaison Committee statement that was endorsed by 61 organizations, there's on the first page of it, it states that all countries must prioritize the urgent phase out of fossil fuels, which are the primary source of greenhouse gas emissions, by eliminating subsidies and supporting a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, rejecting compromises or geoengineering solutions that prolong fossil fuel use. And within religious communities, there does seem to be some disagreement in regards to what I might call a theology of extraction versus a theology of sustainability, or an ecological theology, or what Pope Francis called ecological conversion. And in regards to how we're going to actually get to this urgent phase out of fossil fuels, I'd like to open it up for conversation. How can faith communities most effectively advocate for such an urgent phase out of fossil fuels, especially given the fact that many countries in the world extract fossil fuels, and essentially every country in the world is using fossil fuels at the current time? And so it's in some ways it's an addiction. And so how can religious leaders and faith-based communities help us to break this addiction and to advocate for this urgent transition to a renewable economy?
Thank you for your question. I would say that, as you've just called it now, it is an addiction. There is a special mechanism that has been adopted by these conversations on climate change, and it is called just transition. We understand, and the science has actually showed us that we have to transit, we have to move to a more sustainable way to live, to a more sustainable way to consume. And what we see as a faith person, what I see is that if I myself manage to have a better relationship with myself, I will manage to create more contentment within myself, and I will not need to consume so much, then if I do that kind of inner work, I will also have much more compassion for the rest of the world, and I will see the pain and the sorrow that is there within humanity. And this compassion will drive me to want really to change my lifestyle, to make the effort to change the way I consume, the way I live, the way I use fossil fuels. And then the third thing is that Mother Nature is really not, it's not something you can buy in the supermarket. It's really what has sustained us as human beings for generation after generation. And if we change our relationship with nature, with Mother Nature, and start having this regard, having this gratitude, we understand also that all the things that we extract are not things that are infinite. There is a certain quantity of resources that are there, and we are acting and consuming as if it was unending. So one of the things we have really developed is this understanding of changing our lifestyles. So I think my two partners here will have more to say.
Thank you. I mean, this is an important point. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Islam says God doesn't change a nation unless the nation changes itself. And that starts within the organizations themselves. And I'm saying that because faith-based organizations or faith-inspired organizations are probably the third or fourth largest economic power on earth. And they have a tremendous level of investments, in trillions of dollars. And they have a tremendous size of assets that they own, whether it is ecosystems, buildings, areas, and what have you. So if we want to change the world, we need to practice what we preach. And this is what a number of faith organizations have already started doing so. And recently, more than 40 faith-based organizations, and I believe including the World Council of Churches, the Vatican, and many others, have started divesting from investing in fossil fuel and coal production. There are other examples across the globe where houses of worship, there are more than 120 million houses of worship across the globe, whether they are churches, mosques, synagogues, and what have you. And a number of them, a sizable number of them in thousands, have started applying sustainable building practices. For example, in Morocco, more than 2,500 mosques. In Jordan, more than 5,000 mosques have completely converted into sustainable energy, water conservation, and greening of their areas. So it starts within the institutions, and these institutions will be, a model for the community at large. And this comes the second power of religions, which is the convening and convincing powers. So once the organizations start demonstrating that they are practicing what they are calling people to do, people will listen, especially they are coming from a higher spiritual divine authority that existed for centuries. So when religions were established centuries ago, there was no climate change. But they understood the relationship, the interconnectedness between humans and all living things on earth. Thank you.
Can I talk? Actually, Iyad, you took the talking point I was saying, the divestment, but it's so important and it's so slow. We don't have the time to wait. I think even faith communities are too slow. I come from a church of Sweden, where we totally divested in 2014. And everybody said, oh no, the money will go down, you will have no money. The truth is, it actually went better when we went out of all kind of fossil fuels. So it's not even an economic argument to stay out of fossil fuel business. So go out of the fossil fuels business. If you are a rich faith community, don't go there. You cannot talk about climate justice and at the same time invest in what creates climate justice. So that is an important part. Jonathan was touching upon it. We need to have a theology, a kind of interfaith theology on sufficiency, not only greed or selfishness that might be some of the hardest driving forces. That is our biggest problem when it comes to environment. I would say it's Jonathan written in his book, greed, selfishness, and apathy. That is what we are standing in front of, and that is why we are so slow on climate business. We also have to have frameworks, international frameworks, that steers us into a sustainable future. And it has to be faster, much faster than we see now. And you know, it's because there are business interests, they want to protect their interests, but you can make no money in a dead earth. So even the business interests must see that this must come to an end the way we are heading on the planets. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. I applaud the Church of Sweden as well as the Church of Finland for making commitments to be carbon neutral by 2030. And those two national Lutheran churches are really examples for the world of what a religious institution can do when it is committed to ambitious climate action. And the commitments of those churches also influence the political leaders. I'd also like to point out that the Interfaith call to action for COP29 that was put out by the Interfaith Liaison Committee and endorsed by 61 organizations, it includes organizations from many faiths around the world. So the Muslim organization Ummah for Earth endorsed it. The Buddhist organizations Won Buddhist International and Soka Gakkai International endorsed it. About 50 Christian organizations endorsed it. The Jewish organizations Adamah and the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life endorsed it, as well as a number of interfaith organizations. So it's really important to show the collaboration that's taking place through the Faith Pavilion here at COP that had 40 sessions and 200 speakers, the Faith Pavilion last year, which was the first ever, and the growing movement among religious organizations for a livable future. So I'd just like to give each speaker one last minute to make a closing remark.
I think that we, representing the faith here, are very lucky because we represent something that people can actually believe in and look up to. And we have not only the right, but also the duty to remind people of their inner capacity to change, of their inner values, of their inner power.
And I would like to say, when you go to prayer, you often have your mind work and think about your business and your email that you need to respond to and what have you. But I would like to ask you, when you do reply to your email or do your business, think of your prayers, meaning have your faith drive your actions. And I hope that the delegations, the negotiators do employ or implement what they believe in their hearts. They go to mosques on Fridays, they go to churches on Sundays, but when they do so, they should think about how their connection with the divine will have to drive their decisions for the earth and for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. I totally agree with what we said before, but I just want to add, we need a non-fossil fuel proliferation treaty, and if you go to the website, you see there are many faith institutions that have signed that. The other thing we need, because we need these kind of laws to go in the right direction, the other thing we need is a law on ecocide, an international law on ecocide, because that is also protection for the most vulnerable, and that includes indigenous people and also ecosystem. Thank you.
So I'd just like to conclude with a story that the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison told of a young boy who comes to an elder woman with a bird in his hands. And he says to the woman, "Can you tell me whether the bird in my hands is alive or dead?" And she realizes that the boy is playing a trick on her, because if she says that the bird is dead, then the boy will open his hands and release the bird, and she will be wrong. And if she says the bird is alive, then he will close his hands and crush the bird, and she will be wrong. He's got her coming and going. So she thinks to herself for a minute, and she says to the young boy, "I don't know whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead. All I know is that the life of the bird is in your hands." And that's our situation today. Each of us has power. Each of us has agency. We're all here at this conference for a reason. We're all watching this video. And at this moment in history, at this moment that our ancestors have been dreaming about for thousands of years, we are called upon to live our best selves, to live our highest selves. The climate crisis is also a spiritual crisis. It's not just about the birds and the bees, the trees and the toads. It's about how we live as spiritual beings in a physical reality. And so it has spiritual roots, like greed, short-term thinking, and arrogance. And it has spiritual solutions, like spiritual satisfaction, long-term thinking, caring for other people, and caring for other creatures. Those spiritual solutions are ones that religious and faith-based institutions are uniquely positioned to deliver on in a way that political leaders and scientists and business people are not going to deliver on these spiritual solutions. And so that's why it's essential as we reach COP29 and emissions continue to go up after 29 COPs, that we awaken the sleeping giant of religion for a sustainable future. Because religious institutions are the biggest NGO on planet Earth. They have big educational networks, philanthropic networks, land holdings. And in order for us to curb climate change, we're going to need the active participation of the 85% of humanity that affiliates with a religion. So I just want to bless us that we should, through our efforts, help the current generation and the next generation inherit a thriving, sustainable, and spiritually aware planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
It's mine. Can I take the